Hey guys, it's Sean O'Connell, the managing director here at CinemaBlend, and we have been debating in our offices lately about who is the best on-screen Spider-Man. Since I am the resident Spider-Man geek, it's time for me to finally weigh in. But before we do that, of course, go down and hit subscribe, turn on your notifications. Every time we post a video like this on our YouTube page, we want you guys to be the first ones to see it. I want to make it very clear up front that I don't think that there has been a bad on-screen Spider-Man. So we're really just comparing small differences between the interpretations of the character from the different actors to make this ranking. I'm also going to include Miles Morales, the animated version of Spider-Man that we saw in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, because I thought that that presentation of a new Spider-Man different from Peter Parker was so well done. But I'm going to explain to you why he falls into my rankings in a moment. This means that we have to start at number 4, and I'm placing Andrew Garfield from the two Amazing Spider-Man films at number 4. Now, I like what they tried to do with Andrew Garfield. They wanted to make him more of a relatable, contemporary Peter Parker. He played video games on his mobile device while he was waiting for the lizard. And one thing that Andrew Garfield could do better than the previous Spider-Man, which to that point was only Tobey Maguire, was that he could sell the pathos and the emotion, the heartbreak that comes with being Peter Parker. Now, everything that's tied to Peter being Spider-Man means that there is constantly great sacrifice, whether he's losing his Uncle Ben or losing the love of his life in Gwen Stacy. And when those moments hit in both of the Amazing Spider-Man movies, Andrew Garfield sold the sorrow and the emotion of those. And if you try to see Tobey Maguire sell sadness, it's painful. Like he's just not a talented enough actor to show that. He has a really painful way of trying to make it look like he's sad and crying. And it just doesn't work. But Andrew Garfield does that really, really well. I wish Andrew Garfield had more of an opportunity to continue to grow as Peter Parker, because I'm saying by the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2, he had come into his own as the character, and I would have loved to see where they went with that. But, you know, the other elements of the Amazing Spider-Man films worked against him, mainly the cheesy interpretations of the villains, so he only got 2 opportunities, but his love and passion for the character I thought really shined through in those films. That means at number 3, I am putting Tobey Maguire's interpretation of Peter Parker from the 3 Sam Raimi films. And listen, no fault of Tobey Maguire's. He was asked to play a Peter Parker that is basically lifted out of the 1960s, early 1970s versions of the comics. And in those instances, Peter is not necessarily a believable kid. He is a caricature. He's an idol. He's portrayed in a certain way in those books, and Raimi was definitely trying to capture that essence of the character. So I never really believed that Peter was an actual high school kid living an actual life that was disrupted by his superhero choices. Now again, not necessarily his fault. This is the way that he's asked to play it. So it always came across as corny to me, but corny by design. Also, it didn't help that Tobey Maguire just looked 35 in the part when he was trying to play a high schooler, and often as he's trying to sell the youth side of Peter Parker, that worked against him. He also gets dinged for sure for showing up in the absolute worst Spider-Man film ever made, which is Spider-Man 3. It requires Tobey Maguire to play the dark side of Peter Parker, which comes across as the dork side of Peter Parker. Everything from the dance to the bad gothic hair. You can't escape the fact that he's in those, and I know that people love the way that he portrayed Peter in Spider-Man 2, and he does get some great elements, especially the train sequence, you know, and the aftermath of the train sequence. The reason that I do put him above Andrew Garfield is because some people commented on the fact that Garfield actually looked a little bit too cool to be Peter Parker. There's definitely a nerdy aspect to Peter, an outcast in the social aspects, and Tobey Maguire definitely nails that part. He definitely looks like the kid who you would never expect to be a superhero, which is part of Spider-Man's dual identity. That's an important part of the character, and I think Tobey Maguire did a really good job with that. This is probably the moment where we are going to differ, myself and a lot of other people who are watching this video, because I am putting Shameik Moore's interpretation of Miles Morales at number 2 on this list, which does mean that Tom Holland will end up being number 1, and I will tell you why in a moment. I am primarily a Peter Parker kid. I grew up reading the Spider-Man comics when Peter Parker was Spider-Man. I'm late to the Miles Morales game while I'm reading a lot of the books that he's in right now. It was my introduction to Miles basically through Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I was aware of him as a character, but really didn't know what made him unique and different and special. the origin story presented in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is so perfectly in tonal sync with what it means to be Spider-Man, where you are blessed with these powers, but completely overwhelmed and confused by everything that comes with them. You slowly have to rise up to the mantle of accepting the responsibility of having the powers. It usually comes through a loss, which I thought was felt beautifully in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And Shameik Moore did an amazing job of voicing Miles over the course of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. For two reasons, I'm going to rank him below Tom Holland, and I'll focus primarily on Miles. One, we only have one movie to base it on so far, so I want to see where they do go with the Miles Morales character and how he grows into the role of Spider-Man. But I'll say that the leap of faith scene in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is one of the truly great Spider-Man moments where he finally acknowledges, like, I build my character, I've got my costume, I'm accepting the role, I'm now Spider-Man. He takes that leap, he has that amazing swing through the city, but it ends with him getting his cover. Like everyone throughout the introduction of Spider-Verse, all the different Spider-Men that we met were getting their amazing covers that said, like, now they are the hero. Miles not only takes that leap and becomes the new Spider-Man, but he gets his cover, and it was a brilliant, brilliant way to sort of sell that character. So, I want to see more what they do, and he could climb that rank. He could become the #1 on-screen interpretation of Spider-Man. But also, just because I'm a Peter Parker kid, this is a personal choice. I love what they did with Miles, but I have to go with the Peter Parker interpretation. Naturally, that means Tom Holland's current interpretation of Peter Parker and the Amazing Spider-Man in the MCU is my choice for the best on-screen Spider-Man to date. Tom Holland is perfect casting, and everyone coming out of Spider-Man Far From Home has really singled out the fact that whoever cast Tom Holland for either Marvel or Sony just hit such a home run, and those films benefit so greatly from his portrayal of Peter Parker. He's dorky, he's clumsy, he's awkward, he's an outcast, he's never really comfortable. In Spider-Man Far From Home, he does an amazing job of feeling the weight of being Spider-Man while just wanting to live a normal life, whether it's being on a European class trip or spending time with the girl that he loves, in this case Zendaya's MJ, but also in character. He's a fantastic Spider-Man. The action scenes are better than any Spider-Man movie that we've seen before. The way that he looks in the costume, the different costumes that he balanced. I know some people have a problem with tying Tom Holland's Peter Parker so closely to Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark, but listen, that's a decision that the MCU has made, and I think Holland has rolled with the punches beautifully, to the point where I recently popped in a DVD screener of Avengers Endgame, now that it's out on DVD and home video release, and when I got to the scene where Peter reunites with Tony to explain to him, like, hey, I turned to dust, and do you remember that time 5 years ago, and Doctor Strange told me this, and then they embrace, and I got goosebumps because I just love that father-son relationship. I also love how Tom Holland is now positioned to take the Peter Parker Spider-Man mantle in a direction that we have never seen before through the end of Far From Home. Everything about Tom Holland is just great. He's managed the high school Peter Parker beautifully. He's managed the different stages of Spider-Man in the course of his professional career, from, awkward, my costume is a ski mask and a sweatshirt, to I'm overwhelmed by the fact that I have an Iron Spider costume that has a kill mode that you can initiate, to now I have this perfectly designed black and red costume that is mine, and I'm going to now start to wrestle with the burden of being Spider-Man because I'm back in New York City, and there are new challenges that I will face that are tied to being Peter Parker and Spider-Man and not necessarily Iron Man's protege. Casting Tom Holland in the MCU has elevated Spider-Man to a pedestal that I thought he has always belonged on. It makes him, in my opinion, better than Tobey Maguire and everything he did in his 3 films. Absolutely better than Andrew Garfield and what he accomplished in his 2. And I think from here going forward, it's going to be a race between what Tom Holland is able to do as Spider-Man in the live-action MCU and how Shameik Moore is able to develop Miles Morales in the animated Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So that's my ranking of the best on-screen Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and now it's your turn to completely disagree with me. Go into that comment section and leave me your ranking and include all 4. Tell me why you rank them in a certain way and convince me why I am mistaken with my current ranking. While you are down there, also turn on the notifications after you hit the subscribe button, because we're posting videos like this on the YouTube page all of the time, whether they be superhero related, blockbuster related, indie film related, television related, basically all of your entertainment needs, and we want to make sure that you see every single video that we post here on CinemaBlend.